Afternoon, everyone. I'm Gamu Matarira. I am the founder and CEO of Gen A Consultancy. Thank you for having me on this afternoon. It's a pleasure. So just a brief introduction about myself. I consider myself a global citizen. I was born in Scotland. I was raised between the UK and Zimbabwe, which is my heritage, with lots of travel in between. And as such, I've always been attracted to global organizations. I have 20 years professional experience ranging from accounting and financial services, from the likes of BBC Worldwide and Diageo. I have 3 years with the Japanese exchange teaching program in southern Japan. I spent 5 incredible years as a senior lecturer for the School of Humanities and the Hertfordshire Business School, where I work closely with so many international staff and students and people around the world. And most recently, I spent 5 years in the Middle East, working in Abu Dhabi, where I was involved in the development of the country's vocational education and corporate training programs. So I'm now actually broadcasting from the UK, where I've embarked on my most recent venture, which is Gen A Consultancy, stands for Generation Africa. And I launched Generation Africa smack bang in the middle of the pandemic. And as they say, if you can launch and survive during the pandemic, you can survive anything, anywhere. So this business I've set up to help other entrepreneurs and small and medium-sized businesses to discover Africa as a destination for profits and impact. And because of my insatiable quest for knowledge, I hold a Birmingham MBA, as well as a master's in practice-based research from the University of Hertfordshire. And through that, I've focused on internationalization and cultural diversity. And the relevance of all of that is I've always think it's really, really important to pinpoint what are our strong points, what is it that we can actually bring to the table, because Gen A is actually founded on the premise of collaboration and partnership building. And, you know, a big part of that is to really look at what is it that I bring to the table, what's missing, and what kind of partnerships do I want to build going forward. Okay. So I'm going to talk about Africa as a whole and the opportunities that are coming through, both from a global perspective, but also from the perspective of what's actually going on the ground on the continent. Because as an organization, we work with international folk who are interested in expanding their reach through market penetration in Africa. However, in order to do that, it's so important that we build a really strong pipeline of strategic partners on the ground in Africa, which is why we're looking at it from both sides of the continent. So I'm basically going to expose the trends that have gotten the world really excited about Africa as a trading partner. You'll also realize some of the advancements that have taken place over the last 5 years that actually mean that Africa is the next destination for growth, regardless of where these international businesses are coming from. So by the end of my talk, you'll have an insight into how the most successful international businesses are actually chasing Africa as a growth destination. But first, let's take a look at it from the global perspective. Now, in the current global economy, businesses are actually looking for new access points within global markets because the state of the global economy may have left them no choice. And this could be because, you've become stagnant while competitors are flourishing, or you may be competing with rising prices of raw materials and labor. Or maybe you're looking for growth, but you're not really sure where to start. But most of all, there's been an increased uncertainty thanks to COVID-19. But the good news is there is a solution. You can access global partnerships in strong markets to help navigate, the new year and beyond. And these markets, of course, that we're focusing on are within Africa. But what's always really, really interesting are some of the frequently asked questions I get asked about the continent from outside in. And this includes the diaspora, as well as people that aren't as familiar with the continent. Where can I find data within my industry? So from an international perspective, we never do anything without looking at the numbers and looking at data. And this is a space that's really been a bit tricky to navigate when it comes to Africa, because there aren't so many local organizations that are focused on collecting data. And in fact, there are organizations that collect data, but they don't seem to know what to do with it. But out here in the West, we really do have an understanding of just how important, data is the next gold, to be honest, how important data is. So it's a valid question. Where can people find data within the industry that they want to work with? And the thing about it is a lot of people really struggle with the idea of entering into unfamiliar territory without sufficient market knowledge. Similarly, investors struggle with backing up a project if, again, there's this feeling of, well, we're getting all these business plans and some great ideas coming from the continent, but where are those pre-feasibility studies? Where are those, economic reports to support what entrepreneurs in Africa are saying? This is going to be the next big thing, okay? Now, another key question that comes up a lot is, how safe is it to do business in Africa, and what are the levels of risk? A lot of people aren't able to expand internationally, and it's not just to Africa. Generally, when businesses are talking about international expansion, they aren't able to do that because they've never been able to shift from this fear that holds so many people back when it comes to making really big decisions for themselves and their businesses. But the important thing always is to be informed and to understand how the so-called barriers to doing business in Africa have actually opened up in order to reduce the risk. So another question, which is the best country in Africa to enter? Well, the answer to that question depends on so many different factors. There's no such thing as there's one best country, but there are obviously countries that have advantages, inherent advantages over others in different sectors. But we explore this with our clients and it makes sense for them and their businesses. So these are some of the core questions that are always good to look at. But like I iterated already, information is paramount. Accurate information is absolutely important, but where do you find it? So not knowing where to look for that information, it leaves so many people making uninformed decisions, and worse still, basing their actions or inaction on incorrect data. And none of us can afford to do that. There are so many sources of information that, combined with the right advisory services, equip businesses for market entry on the continent if they're coming from outside the continent, or for continental growth from within the continent. But first, I want you to wrap this around your head. So Africa, the world's poorest continent apparently, is home to some of the fastest growing economies globally. Now, this is a rhetoric that we've all heard about in the media. I mean, Africa is far from poor, but the rhetoric out there, which it has been spun over the decades, has been that, oh, this is a poor country, this is why there's so much aid and so much charity that's required. But Africa is home to some of the fastest growing economies in the world today. Some of them are Rwanda, Senegal, Ethiopia, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, even South Sudan. And let me tell you, the myth that Africa is poverty-ridden and a difficult place to do business is exactly why multinationals are monopolizing the business landscape while everyone else struggles to get growth in this slowing global economy. Yes, there's poverty in many parts of Africa. We are not denying that. But there's also rapid development. There's a wealth gap problem in Africa, sure. Just like there's a wealth gap, problem in the US, in the UK, in India, in Mexico, in Brazil, and so on. In fact, some of you may be aware of this, but the gap has been growing in places like the United States, putting the states in a worse predicament than many parts of Africa. So yes, there's a problem with corruption, but where in the world have we not heard of corruption scandals? They come out of Korea, China, Japan, just to name a few. So these are global phenomena. They're not specific to the African continent. So it's so important and it's really critical we start to debunk some of these myths. For sure, Africa has infrastructural challenges because you can't really rely, for example, on the electricity grid for constant supply of electricity. People have to resort to things like private generators to compensate for periods when there are power cuts. But the fact that China is in Africa, you know what that means, right? Buildings and supporting infrastructure such as transport, power lines, etc., are actually being erected at an extremely fast rate. And on top of that, African governments support exports because African exports contribute to their economy's GDP. And this is done by increasing the earnings in foreign currency. So this also positions them to be able to trade and invest globally. So expansion into Africa or across Africa is a win-win situation for all of us that want to get involved in this journey. People talk about Africa as being underdeveloped. For sure, some parts of Africa are underdeveloped. But how many of you knew that there are more than 400 companies in Africa making over $1 billion in revenues every single year? There are endless possibilities. And this is where my mission becomes more of a shared mission. I founded GenA on the very idea that there are huge opportunities for small and medium-sized businesses in Africa and around the world that want to engage with the continent the right way, not as charities, not as donors, but as partners in the co-creation of value for international businesses, as well as for the businesses they engage with in Africa. So not only do I help their growth into a new market, the ventures I work with automatically become a solution for so many people on the African continent through job creation. So there's a whole other world out there within reach where many businesses could have access to valuable partnerships, where we can reach a wider consumer base and where we can actually achieve phenomenal growth if we do this together. And this is the reason why. The population of Africa is projected to reach 1.7 billion people by 2030. And there'll be rising incomes across much of the continent, generating new business opportunities in the consumer market. Now, annual spending alone by African consumers and businesses is expected to reach $6.66 trillion by 2030. Growth is predicted to come from places like manufacturing to substitute imports and meet really growing local demand. So there's a lot of conversation around how do we start bringing the manufacturing production into Africa so that the value-added activities are done within the continent instead of exporting raw materials, okay? So as a result, Africa is going to become the next great manufacturing center because industries are going to shift away from China to lower cost regions. The other thing is the products that are coming out of Africa are in high demand everywhere in the world, and you can source them much, much cheaper there. On top of that, Africa has more than 120 million active mobile money accounts. This trend will actually allow companies to improve their productivity, speed up transactions, but also improve that access to wider markets. And of course, this growing population means that markets become, really open up because the consumers of the future are actually on the continent. And of course, when you talk about the markets, we're actually talking about Africa having 54 different markets to choose from versus China, for example, which was the last fad recently. And 50 to 60% of consumer spending is coming out of, the economy, the African economy, which means that 50 to 60% of the economy's growth is actually through the spending that consumers are doing within the continent. It's incredible. But this is what also fascinates me as well. And I always like to share the slide because when we talk about opportunities from Africa as a whole, we have to think about, well, which markets are we targeting? And, where is this opportunity? What's the destination of growth? And this diagram just gives you just how a picture of just how vast Africa actually is. It's large enough to fit the United States, China, Taiwan, the UK, the whole of India, Eastern Europe, Italy, Switzerland, Germany, France, Spain, Portugal, Belgium, and the Netherlands inside it. Maybe you're not expecting that. Maybe you are aware of it. But the World Atlas has a way of depicting Africa as a much, much smaller continent than it actually is according to scale. And therefore, people talk about Africa like it's one place, like it's one market, when it really, really isn't. It's so diverse and it isn't. And all of those people, you guys in Africa know this better than I do, right? So when we consider the number of people that occupy this vast land, we start to talk about Africa in multiples. But let's talk about what we mean by growth. So actually, the definition of economic growth is an increase in the amount of goods and services that are produced per head of the population over a period of time. But any country actually needs two things in order for its economy to grow. We need a large population. We also need a growing middle class or people with money to spend. If you look at this diagram, this is the UN's prediction of the world's population to 2100. The purple line is Africa, the green line is Asia, and the other colored lines represent Europe, Latin America, and the US. So you can see it's a pretty clear picture of where the world is headed by 2100, because 90% of the world's population will actually live in Africa or Asia. There'll be more people living in Nigeria, India, and China than in the United States by 2100. And this is an indication of where a large proportion of the customers of the future are actually located. So business is growing in Africa, as well as the number of potential customers who can afford to buy your goods and services. And basically, people in Africa now have the money to spend because entrepreneurship has absolutely exploded. I also mentioned that another key component of a growing economy is the growing middle class. But how do we define the middle class? If we look at the definition by the African Development Bank, they say that people with an annual income exceeding $3,900 or per capita expenditure of $2 to $20 a day represents the middle class. So if we put that in terms of how we live, the middle class are people that have a job and make enough money from the day-to-day jobs to afford food, rent, school fees for their kids' education, perhaps go and watch a movie at the cinema every now and again. Perhaps they can actually afford to take their families on vacation once a year. That's what we're talking about. And this group of people is absolutely on the rise when you look at it in terms of the population across the continent. So let's look at the opportunities by sector. These are some of the opportunities, that's up the areas that a lot of organizations internally and outside the continent are looking at. So the African Economic Outlook, which is a journal that focuses on the economics of most African countries, they back up this information that these industries are currently key industries for Africa. So this is where your opportunities all are. In education, construction, healthcare, technological services, agriculture, and the entire supply chain that complements the industry. For example, the food sector in Africa is set to become the next multi-billion-pound global industry. And the products that are coming out of Africa are in high demand, like I said earlier, and international businesses can actually source these resources far cheaper on the ground. Other sectors, of course, are manufacturing and production, as I've already said, renewable energy, local and regional infrastructure, as well as entrepreneurship. But since the pandemic, food security through imports has been high on many governments' agendas, including the UK. So what sort of business models then, if we know what industries we need to be looking at, what kind of business models should we actually be incorporating? Number one, and I stand by this, collaboration. Collaboration absolutely does not roll off the tongue of many people, unfortunately. A lot of us operate in silos where if we cross-fertilized a lot more, shared best practice, actually worked much closer together, to achieve the same goals, we'd get further along much quicker. So one of the key trends that are actually happening in terms of business models is collaboration with growth hubs or incubation hubs or innovation hubs in Africa. Now, Africa is leapfrogging in many places with technology. Just the last couple of years, we've seen a proliferation of technological hubs across the entire continent. Incubators, accelerators have really been on the rise, and these have become the mechanisms to engage communities particularly of young Africans, to try out their new ideas, which has been fantastic. The World Bank estimates that there are around 90 innovation hubs in over 30 countries in Africa. But I actually think there are much more, because some of the ones that are recorded are the well-known bigger hubs, but I know that there's a growth of smaller players that are coming up in different places. Now, the co-creation hub in Nigeria and the iHub in Kenya, I'm not sure if you've heard of them, they've been recognized as some of the best performing models in this regard. We can talk about startups. Startups at different phases require a different type of financing in Africa. And this has been a very tricky space for a lot of startups, because over the years, they've moved from savings and loans, family and friends kind of savings and loans, to more formal forms of funding, such as seed funding from competitions or equity financing from different partners. And again, referring back to my earlier comment about what investors are looking for, and working with a lot of different people on the ground who have some phenomenal ideas that they want to bring to the world, there's actually a massive gap in terms of the knowledge that's actually required in terms of meeting criteria for what investors actually want in order to even get that seed funding. So this is an area that we really need to focus on to support a lot of SMEs in Africa. Another really common model is the public-private partnerships. A lot of governments on the ground are looking at public-private partnerships in order to move forward, particularly the larger infrastructure type projects. And the informal sector in this regard actually contributes about 55% of Sub-Saharan Africa's GDP, while SMEs are making up 95% of African businesses. So it makes sense that these partnerships actually come into fruition because there are so many opportunities in terms of reaching out and connecting with these sort of people. Now, there's also the emergence of online digital platforms for entrepreneurs in Africa, providing resources such as Farming Academy, such as the new Campfire networking platform that we're going to be launching very, very soon. And this really leads me to talk about what sort of digital platforms really work for Africa and why it's so important. One of the key things that will really support any SME trying to do business in Africa, across Africa, in partnership internationally or regionally, is getting into really good quality networking groups. And for sure, even in my own case, I found that to be the best way to progress JNA consultancy and the work that I'm doing with, and get access to the right kind of consumer base that I want to work with, get access to the right strategic partners that I want to work with, is definitely through the network. So I highly, highly encourage every single person listening to this to check out the Campfire platform, because this is going to be a platform that brings together really professional individuals, like-minded individuals who are all about sharing best practice, knowledge transfer, and building an amazing future for the continent. It's a space that really brings these people together. And if you want more information, feel free to contact Jeanette after this talk, because it's actually one of the areas that I find when people sort of come to me and say, I want to start a business, and they haven't engaged anybody else in the ecosystem, there's a lot that they may find is lacking that they don't realize until we, of course, have the conversation. But if you're already in a network, you're opening up your access to all those opportunities that you otherwise wouldn't have. Right, let's just talk about some of the advantages of trading with African partners, because one of at the core of all of this, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you're not going to get it done on your own. And you're going to have to engage partners, which is why I'm emphasizing the networking groups. I mean, some of the advantages are obvious. Africa is a pathway to continue trading even during a global crisis. I mean, if we just look at some of the pillars of industry in Africa, agriculture is at the top of everybody's minds at the moment, because Africa has enough to feed the world. Africa is absolutely capable to do that. The only thing that's needed there is organization. We have to organize ourselves and coordinate the activities in such a way that, we're able to meet the demand. So much organic and natural goods are coming out of the continent. And this organic trend is on the rise globally. So the markets are demanding organic goods. Agribusiness sector is obviously, like I said, one of the most growing sectors, alongside other complementary sectors, which will, come in the form of manufacturing, production, logistics, and so on. The thing about investing in businesses in Africa, for example, is you don't actually need a lot of money to do it. I think it's about being creative about how you get started, how we work together to take an idea from a pilot stage to a tried and tested concept, and then to a much wider rollout. And I say this because a lot of people, when they talk about trading or doing business in Africa, they're always thinking really, really big. And I always advocate for starting wherever you are and moving step by step, but also identifying what it is, what are your competencies that you bring to the table, and therefore what sort of partnerships do you require that will complement what it is you're doing, And there you get that connection to, the regional connection, the connection to marketers, agents, buyers, sellers, suppliers within this wider ecosystem. But it's not something you should necessarily feel you have to do on your own. I always emphasize collaboration and partnerships. And of course, Africa is basically the home of this new breed of entrepreneurs. We are basically forming this ecosystem of trusted, reliable, well-vetted professionals to really move the rhetoric away from Africa as being a corrupt landscape to do business in. And honestly, there are some really high quality, amazing businesses across the continent that honestly I'm so proud to represent. And when we're working with the international community, it's about showcasing and making visible all the good work that's already happening, because it's not about the international community teaching Africa how to do things, but it's about the international community partnering with Africa, because sure, some of the know-how and expertise may be outside of the continent, but internally, there are a lot of really smart, really dedicated, committed individuals that have the advantage of the context on the ground and bring that value and meet everybody halfway in that regards. So it's also about building up the confidence in ourselves as Africans to say, we know what we want, we know the initiatives we want to drive forward, and we are able to be in the driving seat, and then partners facilitate what it is we're trying to do on the continent. And just a few reasons why some businesses actually don't succeed on the continent. And really it's just a lack of knowledge on internationalization best practice, particularly if you're looking for that growth path. When you look at your roadmap, where do you want to be in the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? And a lot of the time businesses look at a growth pattern that starts from wherever you are, you go regionally, you start maybe looking at your neighboring countries. But interestingly, the word on people's minds is export quite early on, which doesn't necessarily have to be the first step, but you can always build onto that. But wherever you are along that journey, knowledge of best practice is really, really the key. So invest in yourselves, invest in training that actually is going to equip you to be able to make some of those decisions as you go through your business. And this will feed into your go-to-market approach. And some of the ways to mitigate risk is in ensuring you check and double check your assumptions about where it is you want to break into and what you want to do. Because again, incorrect assumptions lead to disastrous results. Of course, cultural distance. I talked about the fact that there are 54 different markets across the continent, but even within each country, I mean, take South Africa alone, there's so many different tribes and so many different languages that are spoken within one country. So there's obviously this need to be aware of the different cultures we're engaging with, even as the diaspora or as Africans within the continent. We from different countries, we all have a completely different culture, and misunderstandings can happen. So it's not about, I have a great idea and I'm just going to replicate it, or I have a great idea and I'm just going to rope in a number of African countries to come along with me. The thing is, a great idea is always fantastic, but always work with local partners on the ground who will be able to design it using their own context to guide where you want to go. And another one of the issues that businesses tend to find is dealing with unvetted suppliers. And this can easily be mitigated by, again, being part of a trusted, reliable network, because the network will always support you and the network will always introduce you to the right sort of partnerships that you need in order to make sure that your business goes from strength to strength. But one of the key things I also want to reiterate is market testing. I don't see that there's enough market testing happening on the ground. A lot of people will start off with a fantastic idea because they feel it's a great idea, but have you tested it with the users? Is this what the market is crying out for? So some of these things are dealt with through having a coach or a business mentor that can take you step by step in order to understand the areas you really need to look into and adapt to in order to make this a success. And these are just some examples of some strategic partners that I find absolutely amazing on the continent, which are not just local. These are not just local businesses. These are sort of strategic partnerships between African companies and Western initiatives. Mara Phones, which is based in Rwanda, and it's a partnership with a UK telecoms company, and it's the first organization that's actually creating smartphones, building smartphones in Africa. And what's really interesting about this is there is a model out there where manufacturers around the world are looking to build more technologically based devices within Africa. And it could look like just sending over the parts, and then a local manufacturer puts the parts together. You manage to create jobs, create factories, create jobs, put the parts together, and you're now selling phones internally. But the question is always, where is that capacity and where is it coming from? And we as Africans, we have to do a lot more to start building that capacity in-house and not relying so much on the imports or the distribution coming from outside of the continent, because this is where we're losing. I mean, M-Pesa is based in Kenya, and they have just gone from strength to strength, mobile platform, digital mobile money platform. And there's some similar ones, in Southern Africa, EcoCash in Zimbabwe, for example. And the other thing about these is they are the largest players in their markets. They don't have a lot of competition because there's very few people coming up behind them, starting up innovative solutions that can be rolled out and can compete and actually can create a different market share within that wider market. But my point here really is strategic partnerships really do work. All of these initiatives came out of Africa, but the way they've been able to propel themselves is they've had a global view on their growth. And it's all well and good to say, we want to create African solutions to African problems in an African context. However, we also have to be realistic and look at it from the perspective of, but where is our starting point? Where are you right now? And before you get to the point where you completely take all the activities in-house, you need to understand that actually there's something I need to learn first, which is why education has really exploded. Training and education has really exploded, because it's this realization that individuals need to be equipped with the right information, with the right know-how and the right expertise. And then and only then can this have a knock-on effect where individuals on the ground are training the next generation and so on and so forth, and building that internal capacity. So this is why the strategic partnerships are super important up front, in order for long-term sustainable solutions, absolutely, in the end. So just to summarize my talk, Africa is absolutely the next frontier after China. The population will triple by 2100, so the consumers of the world, of the future, are on the continent. There's this misconception that the biggest consumers of African goods are the diaspora around the world. That is actually not true. The biggest consumers are actually within the continent. Of course, Africa's got the youngest global workforce globally, so we need to be thinking about this, the youth. How are we going to equip the youth to be able to take our economies forward? And again, I believe it's through entrepreneurship. I think the type of education is very, very different. Mainstream education that leads to mainstream jobs is not the model. It's not the model for Africa. Entrepreneurial education is the model for Africa, because we need more people creating more organizations on the ground. And of course, collaboration is a win-win. There is plenty of pie for everybody to get stuck in. So, I'd like to see more collaboration happening rather than people operating in silos. And just to finish off, I love the saying, Africa does not need sympathy or overseas development assistance. What Africa actually needs is a fair chance to trade with the rest of the world and amongst ourselves. Thank you for listening. I've been Gamu Matarira, a founder of Jene Consultancy, and I would love it if you connected with me either on LinkedIn or got in touch with me via email. And if you have any business mentorship, strategy coaching, or consultancy needs when it comes to your business in Africa, we're here to help. We offer end-to-end services. So all the way from startup, designing your actual business, creating your business, defining your business, through to, we have investment partners. So through to the investment side of things, we cater for all of that from within our collaborations and partnerships. And I'd like to thank Jeanette from Farming Academy for having me on. Jeanette is one of our core business partners who looks after particularly the agricultural space, agricultural education for the continent, and very excited in terms of what's coming for 2022. And we'd love you guys to join us on that journey to increase growth and prosperity on the continent. Thank you.
I would say thank you, Gamu, because you just hit it spot on. Very, very direct, going, targeting the big questions and the answers for them. So, thank you.
No, you're very welcome. Hi, Ingrid.
Hi. I think you just summed up everything. The whole purpose of why I even started the whole virtual summit. You know, at some point I was actually losing faith in, you know, like what did I accomplish at the end of it all? And now, just after listening to you, like there was a big hole inside of me that was, you know, yearning to be filled. And let me just say, you did that for me. Like you did it, because even as I was looking for partners, people to work, focus the message was I was looking at the African youth. You know, I was looking at where we are now. You know, in South Africa, just recent statistics, they say Africa is a young continent. So the average age is between the average age is 28. You know, so that makes, like, you know, the people really young, and yet there's about, just South Africa alone has about 9 million young people between the ages of 15 and 35 that are not in employment, they're not in education. They wake up every day not knowing exactly what to do. This is a place where we need to start from, you know, and all the things that you mentioned, you know, I think now it actually gives me, like, you know, a renewed sense of purpose and vision, you know, to be able to find someone that actually, like, you know, just takes everything that I've been, you know, fighting so hard, like, you know, to get out of there and just put it simple, you know. So I'm so grateful.
Oh, you're very welcome, Ingrid. You know, I think what you're describing is something that a lot of people experience. A lot of people say, you know, I'm super passionate about, you know, the wealth and health of my country, because, you know, as we all have observed, it doesn't matter where we're from in Africa. I mean, I operate on a very Pan-African level. I'm from Zimbabwe originally, but I operate with this view of Africa as a continent, because what's good for Zimbabwe is good for South Africa, it's good for Ghana, it's good for Kenya, you know? And really what it's about is bringing thought leadership to the table, really practical, realistic thought leadership to the table, to discuss what are those challenges that we're facing. And the way to do that is to organize. We need to be organized. And we've done that through one of the other networks I run is a Business Insights International SME Network, Pan-Africa. And the whole idea of it is we have a Business Insights International SME Network UK. People talk about wanting to do international trade, but people do business with people they know and people they like. But also, I recognize that there is an exclusive undertone to that, where really what we're talking about with Africa is we need to open the opportunities and not be so closed off. Because like you said, there are all these groups of youth who they're young, they're energetic, they want to do something, and all they need is an opportunity. And sometimes they don't have the resources. But guess what? Whose responsibility is it to ensure that those resources are available for these young people? in the first place? And what are those people who are responsible in those positions doing about it? So a lot of the time our governments are letting us down, which means it's the private sector. It's the private sector's responsibility at this point. We can't wait for the government to do it for us. It's the private sector that needs to mobilize the resources and the youth and actually start leveraging off of the different platforms and different opportunities to ensure that these opportunities trickle down to the people that need to be reached. Because honestly, this is where the wealth of the future sits. It's in these young people. They just need, and they're smart. They are so smart. You know, I love talking to young people because some of the ideas they come up with, I mean, I just think, see, the only difference between you and some kids sitting in the US is they'll come up with this idea and they have a lab to test it. You know, unfortunately, in this case, it's a list of ideas and not enough structural support. And this is what the ecosystem building mindset should do for these youth. And what I love is one of the examples I was speaking to Jeanette, Farming Academy, about this. There are the youth in Zimbabwe who are so passionate about farming, and all we do is we bounce around ideas, and then we pass them down to the core leaders, and then we work with the leaders in sub-steering groups to move things from one stage to the next with follow-ups to make sure there's actually real action. So it really is about identifying who are the leaders in the space and then working together in partnership. It's the way to move it forward. So I hear your frustration, but I also see the solution.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
So like the whole thing for me began, you know, at some point, nothing to do myself, you know. So I'm and I've got my husband, he works a consulting job, but at some point that became hard, like to sustain everyone, you know. Kids going to school, you've got your rent, you've got all kinds of expenses, you know. And then it got me thinking, like, you know, what is it that I can do, like, you know, from my side? What can I learn now? You know, I started looking into, realized I don't have the money, like, you know, for a university education, but that didn't stop me. You know, I continued searching until I came across the University of the People, which is an online university that actually it's almost a free university because they only charge for like administration costs and that kind of thing. But even if you don't have the money for that, you can get a scholarship for it, which I did. So I got the whole 4 years because the administration costs are like $100 for each course. So there's about 40 courses. They gave me, I think, $4,000 US dollars scholarship. You know, so every term I just register my courses, and you know, so I was like, okay, fine, I'm getting into this 4-year course, but what is it that I can do, like, you know, to do other things, you know? So I'm embarked on a journey, like, you know, to learn some skills, some self-taught skills, like, you know, web designing, a lot of other things. I created my company website on my own. You know, I created this whole, you know, just on that. So it got me thinking to say, if someone at my age with 4 kids, and, you know, I have every excuse that I can come up with, you know, I don't have time for this because of that. You know, imagine someone who is young and they have, like, you know, free time on their hands, you know. So this is what I've been. Hello?
Yes, you're coming in and out, but I've picked up the. Yes, it's okay. I picked up the.
If you can hear me, I'm just going to.
Yeah, no, okay. We can't hear you, but.
So
go ahead.
Where do we begin? You know, because.
It's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
What's the next step from here?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I don't know much about your background, Ingrid. Are you running? What are you running? What's the organization you're running, and what's the core purpose of the organization? I can't hear you. Okay, Ingrid, why don't we touch base outside of this event? Why don't you connect with me, and then we can continue the conversation. Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
I have a little comment related to what Ingrid was talking about.
Yeah.
Because I had a little session yesterday where I introduced the educations at Farming Academy. And there's a reason why we put the educations together the way we did. Not only as acquiring skills, theoretically, it is also making everything lined up so you can actually start working or building your own company.
Yes.
By also knowing, all the things to farm, but you also need how to sell your products.
Yes.
And how to explain your company. Because that's the only way you can get anybody to support you and to buy your product is by telling them why they should go to you.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, what you're describing is moving away from theory to actual practice, isn't it?
Exactly.
How does this actually work in the real world? And, I mean, if you really think about it, the way education is set up at the moment, it supports it supports what governments want people to do, get into jobs, so that we can guide and tell you how to do things. What I love about what you're describing and what you guys do is that as an individual can take the education and directly, without having to ask for permission from the government or anybody else, they can start earning a living for themselves, their families, start creating that generational wealth and continue to pass that knowledge down. And that is that sustainability model that we need to adopt the mindset of. So yeah, it's absolutely critical. And you talk about, communicating what it is you want to do. This is one of the areas that really needs work. It's not enough to say, I have this business and I've put together this business plan. I mean, like I said in my presentation, people do business with people they like. So you actually have to be able to be in front of, the investor or the partner and convince them to come on board to be with you through this journey of your business. So the presentation skills become super important. And I think a lot of people underestimate that. They think, theoretically in a business studies program, I've done all the things correctly. But if you don't stand out, no one will notice. And so that's where it is so important, like Ingrid was saying, to recognize what is it that I need to do in my business, and then go and search for where do I get this training to upskill myself to be able to deliver. And it also shortcuts the amount of time it leapfrogs over the failures and the problems you would ordinarily have if you try to do it all by yourself and try to learn by yourself. Why not learn from people with a wealth of experience? I mean, how many years experience of sheep farming have you been doing, Jeanette?
Yeah. Look at my gray hair.
20 years also, right?
Yes, 20.
There we
20
go.
years of school, 20 years of teaching.
Yes. So, this is a worthwhile investment. And I always say to people, before you ask for an investment from an investor, what have you invested in yourself? That's the starting point. Invest in yourself first. Get the right training, because I'm not calling it, it is a type of education. It's more that vocational technical training version of education that gets you straight into employability. Invest in yourself, absolutely right. And I'm pleased to hear that, Ingrid, you went through that journey, learned how to make your own website. And, that's what it's all about, because I realize it comes down to the mindset. It comes down to the mindset that we need to shift people's mindsets away from someone else will solve the problem for me or someone else will do it for me, to I need to learn to fish and then go out and fish on my own.
Exactly. And to empower yourself.
Absolutely.
For the future.
Yeah.
And that's another thing with our educations. Not only do you get the knowledge you get from a normal school, but then we top it off with having diverted the exam a bit to making your business ready.
Excellent. Yes.
And that's the big difference there. Yeah. And it would be easier if you need to get a donation, for instance, for somebody, some support for somebody. if you cannot pay for the education yourself, it is much easier to get support for something that everybody can see. It will have a direct value for you.
Yeah.
You will take a huge step up. You
Yeah.
are not just left with a certificate, you are left with skills.
Yes.
And if you want to go further, when you have taken the first education here, you have got a little shortcut if you want to go into taking a bachelor's degree, because there's a lot of the lectures we are doing, they also contain stuff that is included in a bachelor's,
Yeah.
but it is on a very practical level.
Yeah.
But it will give you extra. Let's see, for example, somebody in Africa wants to become a farmer and is thinking, maybe I should not only take an education, maybe I should go to university. Instead of having to answer that question up front, because it's hard to know when you don't know what you are actually committing to. If you start by committing to the education, taking that, you'll have a very good shortcut for entering at bachelor's level. And when you have that, you have something that a lot of advisors, consultants that come out from university don't have, because you also have the practical skills.
Yes.
So if you end out with a bachelor that you found, you grounded it with the education, then you'll become the best consultant ever. And you'll get the job before everybody else because you have extra skills. Full empowerment.
Absolutely. No, that's perfect. That's perfect. And I think this is why I have to take my hat off to you guys for organizing an event like this, because this is an important conversation. The conversation that steers the African mindset away from the piles of qualifications is the way forward. You know, I have to have my master's and then my PhD and, you know, and so on and so forth, just for the sake of, this is how we've been raised. We need to shift that to, actually, that's not what works for Africa. What works for Africa is practical, applicable education, as you're describing, that gets Africa out of the rut that it's in, into its full, you know, light in terms of what's possible. And it really is, you know, I remember not even just a few years ago, vocational education, or people that chose to go down the vocational route, for example, it was kind of shunned upon, you know, as if to say that the mainstream university degrees are better, or if you don't have it, you know, you're lacking something. And it's so interesting, because if I think of the number of people with degrees in Africa, and I've been traveling around the world, and I meet a lot of these people around the world, not working in the capacity they should be working in, because they've had to leave the continent to try to find a job, whether it's as a taxi driver or something like that, even though they've got a pile of degrees. It's pointless. The education that everybody needs today, and what works for our society today, is that practical training that gets you straight, you get the skills, you can apply the skills, and that's it. And that's that. I noticed that there was a comment from Wiche, if you want to read it out.
All right. Oh, Mwicha, by the way, is my sister and my partner.
Oh, amazing. I love that. The family business. Okay, so what Mwicha is saying is absolutely correct. There's a whole lot of valuable information out there, such as what has been shared, and that is what our African youth are missing. They're so enclosed within their boundaries, and so they need to break the walls, change their mindsets, and get learning and partnering. That's the answer. So working within local communities has made me notice that great ideas are there in the local communities, but crying out to the government all the time is slowing everyone down. Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it's about just looking around and seeing what's working and what's not working. And what's not working is waiting for the government to fix it, because that's going to be a long wait. Okay, so whilst we're waiting for Ingrid, I don't know if she's still having problems. This is the Campfire platform.
Yes.
So campfire.remo.co.c/Farming Academy. Jeanette, do you want to talk through it?
Yeah, we have some different spaces. And it is a brand new thing, so we are building a bit here. So just go in, become a member. And the brilliant things here is you can go in and see here you have the members. So if you, for instance, want to connect with Gamu or me, you can click directly and connect with us. And there will be there's a chat function. So if you can see somebody you want to speak with is present, you can do the chat function, or you can, like this, send a message.
Directly.
Yeah. And then we have some different spaces where we can go in and talk about different subjects. And here, of course, sheep farming, very important when you ask me. And if you scroll down a little bit, you can see we'll start to connect with Africa here also. African training and business. This is a place where everybody can share ideas, and you can, in the community, you can connect directly to different members and ask for advice. And we will do some events here. Some of them will be for free. Some of them will be paid events, but we can directly announce it to those we know are interested. Let's say we have something related, like this summit here. It would be very, very natural to connect it to the African Training and Business Network in that space. So if we want to do this event again, let's say in January, of course, we're going to do it here, because everybody who's in the community will then directly could go into the events. And so please, everybody who's interested in anything related to this community, tell them to come in and become a member, because the more members we are, the more networking we can do. And let's ask Gamu, is networking important for business?
It's the bloodline. Networking is the bloodline of business. It is the way you're going to succeed. Without it, yeah, it's, I don't want to say you're doomed for failure, but the results will be very different.
Exactly. And the event platform that is connected to this community is optimized for doing network and networking. And it's actually in an event like that, I met Gamu.
Yes.
And I'm very happy I met her.
Likewise, Jeanette, likewise. Great.
And I hope, and then I know Gamu is working on some business lectures for Farming Academy.
Yeah.
So you can also go in there and find some information that you need to know. And when you're building a business, I have started up my own business a few times. And the last time I started up my own business was Farming Academy.
Yeah.
And it is crucial to know what you want and what you don't want.
Yeah.
And if you want to start up a business, you need to be prepared.
Yeah.
Because it's not the same as being an employee and working for somebody else, because you have nobody else to blame when you're starting up your own business. And you are the sales department, you are the accountant, you are having all the functions when you start up.
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe you should outsource.
Yes.
Because
yes.
You cannot
Agreed.
be an expert on every field.
No one is an expert on everything. And this is the misconception with people, starting their own businesses. Sometimes I feel I always ask the question, I ask several questions to try to get to the point, has this person really understood the journey that they're about to embark on? Because you're a whole corporation in one, which means you have to be very clear what are your core competencies, and where your weaknesses are, and what sort of partners you need to plug those weaknesses. So we all should do that exercise. It's not that some are better than others. Everyone has their strengths, but
Exactly.
you can't be you can't, be an entire organization on your own.
And then you need to know your own value.
Yeah.
It's very important, because you can get ahead in the market by selling cheap, but if you're selling so cheap that it will cost you money, you will not survive in business for very long. And in Farming Academy, when it comes to prices, we had the idea we need to have fair prices for everyone. And when we say fair prices for everyone, we actually charge the same amount no matter where in the world you come from. But if people needs help, we have built a company so we can take in donations and use those donations to give people who are struggling to pay for the lectures, give them free lectures. So we don't give people money, we can give them free education if somebody else will donate for it. And that's a very fair treatment of everybody, because it also has a great value, as you as a person know. I did not get any favors for anybody. I got fair help when I needed it.
Yeah.
But we are in the same, we're in eye level.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct. And it's far more valuable and has a much, much longer lasting impact than just handing out money. The training, the education will stay with an individual for a lifetime. Whereas, you can't always guarantee where resources end up being used because of the many competing priorities for an individual on the continent, or wherever they are in the world. If they're in a situation where they can't afford the education, usually they're more in a survival mode, right? And and there's no guarantee where the resources go through no fault of their own, just through circumstances. So it's just one way to guarantee that the education gets where it goes to, because education is it's powerful, it's empowering.
Exactly. And nobody can steal what you have in your head.
No, absolutely not. That's your intellectual
Nobody
property
can take it away
at the end of
from
the day.
you again.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. That was really great today. Really enjoyed that.
And I hope to see all of you on the new community also, so we can connect and grow in the future also. But I think on behalf of Ingrid, I will say thank you so much to everybody for attending, and please have a very, very wonderful evening. See you again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.